Hello and welcome into this edition of the Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. Happy Hero World Challenge Week to all who celebrate. Rex, you were down there in the Bahamas having some fun in the sun. But first, before you can have a working vacation, Tiger Woods was in the press conference, his annual State of the Union as it relates to all things Tiger there at the Hero. What was your biggest takeaway? Because it was the first time we've heard from Tiger in 2025 after all of his injuries.
I think I would do Tiger's press conference in 3 bullet points, essentially. One, it was the state of Tiger. It seems like every December he comes in and talks about the state of his body, state of rehab, state of his game, when we might see him again. And usually there's not much to be optimistic about. This time was no different. We can touch on that a little bit later. I think the more important part in this conversation is his position as chair of the Future Competitions Committee for the PGA Tour. Touched on all things PGA Tour related. We all know the PGA Tour is heading towards a new model, something virtually entirely different than what we have right now. And as the chair of that committee, he's in the middle of this. There's a lot to unpack on that front. And then finally, it's the part that actually just got me in trouble on the range. You and I were doing a roundtable on golf today, and I got a little too animated, apparently, for Billy Horschel, who I think he shot a 4-iron at me and just narrowly missed me, by the way. I mean, you'll be hearing from my lawyers. It was a very dangerous shot. I'm not quite sure why he decided to do that, but that had to do with him and his capacity as a future Ryder Cup captain, specifically the Ryder Cup captain 2 years from now at Adair Manor in Ireland. And Tiger Woods' comment was, and I had to write it down, no one has asked, quote, no one has asked. How is that possible? How is that possible in the year of our Lord, 2025, October, as you pointed out correctly, about a month shy of when the PGA of America normally announces the captain for the next Ryder Cup, that they haven't even had a conversation, that it hasn't even come up. We all know, you and I and anyone else that watches the podcast or knows anything about golf, that it's his job if he wants it. It's a natural fit. He has a great relationship with JP McManus, who owns Adair Manor. He has played in JP McManus's Pro-Am before. It was supposed to be his job at Bethpage. I just don't understand how we haven't gotten there yet. But I know that's the smaller of the 3 stories, but I just wanted to touch on that one.
Yeah, and I can just put a fine point on that one because you're exactly right. Like, that was extremely eyebrow raising that the Team USA, and I'm talking about in its entirety, PGA of America, the leadership, past captains, future captains, whatever you want to describe it as, they are 2 months removed from what happened at Bethpage. Like, they've already done a debrief. They've already done sort of reaction. They've already sort of formulated a plan. You would think for the future. And yet, as we sit here on December 2nd, Tiger Woods, the presumptive favorite to be the U.S. Ryder Cup captain in 2027, has not yet had a conversation with PGA of America officials, according, again, to Tiger Woods. You're exactly right. Late January, typically, historically, is when PGA of America has announced the next U.S. Ryder Cup captain. They were delayed, certainly, back in 2023, sort of waiting for Tiger Woods. That one didn't end up coming to fruition. They didn't end up announcing Keegan Bradley until later that summer. So maybe, Rex, they view it as, we've got a little bit of time. Let the PGA Tour melodrama sort itself out. Have a plan for PGA Tour's future and beyond, which Tiger Woods, as we're going to discuss on this podcast, is very much a part of those discussions. But yeah, I was certainly surprised by that, because if not Tiger, then who? That is probably a conversation down the road that we will have on our season finale. Let's talk about Tiger's position, not as a player. We're going to get into that because it did not paint a particularly optimistic view, but as his role as the head of the Future Competitions Committee. He said they've met 3 times. They speak almost daily, sort of bandying ideas about. What stood out to me, Rex, was just how many constituents are involved. And we knew that. Like, we knew that this was going to be messy, because you don't just have a caliber of quote-unquote players. You also have, superstars. You have middle-class players. You have players who are trying to get their way onto the PGA Tour. You have PGA Tour executives. You have private equity involved. They're trying to get a return on what is a $1.5 billion investment. You have media partners, not just one media partner, but multiple media partners. You have different title sponsors. You have different tournament directors. How do you align all of those interests? Tiger Woods made very clear, laid bare, this is a very complicated scenario.
It is. And I will give Tiger Woods credit on this one. I asked on Golf Today what surprised me the most. It's how open he actually was about these discussions. Look, there were no details, because there aren't any details to talk about quite yet. They are essentially trying to build a plane while it's in the sky. It's going to be very complicated. And the idea that somehow they get this done before 2027, that might be one of Tiger Woods' greatest accomplishments if they're able to pull that off. More so than the 15 majors and the 82 PGA Tour titles, everything else he's accomplished in his life for all the reasons you just pointed out. And this is the fun part, because this is what you and I have been doing, I would argue, maybe for the last year, if not more. And I've thrown this up to you on how many occasions do you think I've hit you with it if I gave you a blank piece of paper?
They literally said they have a blank piece of paper and they were using a whiteboard. Like, that is exactly what you and I have been doing.
And the idea that you don't have a blank piece of paper right now, I think you and I had this discussion after Pinehurst, and I had spoken with someone who was on the policy board, and I kept peppering with the idea that, yeah, but if I gave you a blank piece of paper and you could come up with the best 20 event PGA Tour schedule, the majors are what they are, so take the majors out of it. They're going to be the 4 outliers on the schedule. But if I gave you 20 events, let's go to the best cities, the best golf courses, the best fields, the best time of year. Imagine how cool that could end up being. But as this policy board told me at Pinehurst 2 years ago at the U.S. Open, we don't have a blank piece of paper for all the reasons that you just pointed out. Let's just take the TV partners. And I know that's a little parochial because this is where the world that we're coming from. But these TV rights deals, the current wave of TV rights deals goes through 2030. And so essentially you're having to tell all the TV partners, just not Golf Channel or NBC or CBS Sports or ESPN Plus, all of the media partners that, all right, what we agreed to through 2030 isn't going to be the same. And I'll give you the example. You agreed to 42 events over the course of an entire year, Thursday, Friday coverage for the Golf Channel. Again, I'm kind of speculating here, but that has something to do with the agreement. If you come back and you say, but no, in 2027, it's going to be something so much more special. Instead of 42, you get 20. I'm not very good at business, but if I'm the CEO, I'm kind of like, well, that's not what we paid for. You're essentially taking more than half of the inventory that we paid for. That's just one conversation in a mountain of conversations and negotiations.
How about the 20 tournaments? The 20 tournaments that you would be lopping off.
The 20 golf courses, the 20 sponsors, all of it has to factor into this. These are not easy, just sort of turnkey operations. So that's the complicated part, to be fair. Now, I do like the idea that they have reached the point in these committee meetings, and Tiger talked about that. He has gone through virtually thousands of different models, and you're trying to find out exactly what's going to work best. On my way over here, that's why I was a little late. Apologies. I was stopped, and I was talking with Harris English, who sort of broached this subject 2 weeks ago at the RSM Classic. I just sent you a picture on text about why my camera seems to be jostling around. If you'd like to share that with the public, I understand I have a little bit of an issue going on here. The wind's blowing a little bit more than I expected. I will say that this is going to be very complicated. But as I was talking with Harris, all of the players love the idea that if we do have truly a blank piece of paper and we can start over, and this kind of goes to the origins of the PGA Tour, that it grew out of all of these separate events. These were all separate entities. They're all separate businesses. And somehow it was all folded into 110, the PGA Tour. But if you started over and you did it a different way and you tried to make the best model you could, that's what they're trying to get to.
Which I think is an admirable goal. And if you're following along on YouTube, first of all, thank you. Make sure to smash that subscribe button.
That was, that's very precarious.
But that is how Rex is currently positioned as he sits there at the Hero World Challenge. I do think that's an admirable goal. And, you know, Brian Rolap mentioned at the Tour Championship. Brian Rolap mentioned it a couple of days ago at a summit. Tiger Woods mentioned it, the NFL model. And not just steering away from NFL season and an American market that is dominated, if not distracted, by what they do on a weekly basis. But I do think there are some merits to what the NFL does. There's a reason why it's the most popular sport in this country, and that is because they make every single week important. It doesn't matter whether it's week 3 or whether it is week 15. And you could make the argument when you look at this PGA Tour schedule that it is bloated, that there are lulls, and I think that has been even more defined in this signature event series model that we have, where the PGA Tour is identifying these are the best tournaments, these are where you're going to get the best fields, and everything else does not match up to that in importance, in stature, in field strength, in money, whatever other metric you want to use. They are making that abundantly clear. And so if the PGA Tour's goal is to trim some of that quote-unquote fat and to make every event and every tournament feel important, feel significant, feel like it's building to a logical and reasonable conclusion to the end of the PGA Tour season, then I think that is a realistic goal. As you mentioned, the legal fees that you would have to potentially accrue to get to that point are substantial. But I do think, as Tiger Woods and the rest of the independent directors and the players and the PGA Tour executives sit in that room and whiteboard how to make the best possible product for the PGA Tour, I do think there is some merit to that discussion. Paring down some of the tournaments, as long as, and this is a very important distinction and a caveat, as long as you are not minimizing playing opportunities in those tournaments. I think those two things go hand in hand. If you cut down tournaments, you have to expand field sizes. At that point, every player who is a PGA Tour card-carrying member should have the same opportunity to make a living and to play in the tournaments. Whoever plays the best among those top 100, those are the players who keep their card for the next season. I think that is the ideal.
And that's the other half of the equation. And that's kind of what I'm digging into today on golfchannel.com. Just the idea I asked Tiger Woods specifically that, okay, scarcity is Brian Rolap's one of his 3 tenets that he wanted this committee to address. The other is parity and the other is simplicity. Scarcity is really straightforward. This is less is more. We don't have to look up a definition. You're not reading between the lines. We know what scarcity is about. It's the parity part, which you just touched on, that I was trying to get an idea of how Tiger sort of reconciles that, because scarcity and parity are mutually exclusive. And how are you balancing those two motivations? Because I will go to the example that you just gave me, that if we go to a 20 event schedule and we're just picking that number randomly, to be clear, so was Harris English when he brought it up. It could be 20, it could be 25, it could be 30, whatever the case may be. But if you go to 20 from 42 PGA Tour events, you can't make up that difference. You have talked about field sizes. But what the number of fully exempt PGA Tour players is right now, which is far less than it was last year, will not be able to get the equal number of starts based on 20 events unless you go to 250 player fields. And I'm throwing that number out there, but you would have to do something ridiculous to try to get it to that number. There is at the end of the day, if you put it on a spreadsheet, X number of playing opportunities this year on the PGA Tour. That is far less than it was last year, and that was far less than it was the year before. If you go to 20, which is, as I pointed out numerous occasions, less than half of what we essentially had last season on the PGA Tour, just do the simple math. You're coming up with half as many playing opportunities, regardless of how big the field sizes you think you could possibly make. And I wouldn't imagine they're ever going to go beyond 100 to 120 going forward. That seems to be the magic number that they really like. So I'll go back to parity comes from this idea that you have a healthy promotion and relegation system. This seems to me that we're heading in an area that it's not quite as healthy. And I'm not here to pick on Live Golf, but we can all agree that 4 players in and 4 players out on Live Golf, that's their relegation. That's really not a healthy promotion and relegation system. I'm not saying the tour is going to become that, but you're moving closer to that model. And I think that's the concern going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable concern, and that's why I'm so fixated on the field size, because you're exactly right. I think 120 would have to be like the fewest number of players that you could have at a tournament. You already have 100 fully exempt PGA Tour members, then you add the 20 from the Korn Ferry Tour, then you add the 10 from the DP World Tour, then you add a couple from Q School. Like it would have to be at least 132, if not 144, and then we're back to where we were. Remember, I was in Pebble, Rex, earlier this year when the PGA Tour came out with like their slow play initiative, and they're like, yes, it is proof that we can't have 144 and 156 because it just bogs down. There's too many cars on the highway. It's just math. It's just simple math. I will say, if you do pare down the schedule, and you're only starting, we're going to get to this, in mid-February and finishing by Labor Day, you do have more daylight than you have in January and early February. So I do think that is less of a concern. Brian Rollup a couple days ago mentioned that what the PGA Tour does not struggle with is parity, and that right now he's trying to ensure that the parity on the PGA Tour remains strong. It's not like Scottie Scheffler is winning every single tournament. He's winning about a quarter of his tournaments, which is extraordinary and something we've not seen since Tiger Woods. But it's not like he is completely mopping up and creating a dynasty. That is the hardest to achieve, but you have to ensure that parity remains strong in the PGA Tour by bolstering and strengthening the Korn Ferry Tour, by making sure that the top college and amateur players have pathways, the DP World Tour, strengthening that partnership as well. That is vitally important to the strength of the PGA Tour, is sort of regenerating the stars that come and go on an annual basis.
Well, and to your point, Tiger Woods, when I asked him about scarcity, he used the word scare people, I think 3 times in the press conference about how scarcity scares people. And if you just happen to finish 99th on the points list this year, you're certainly looking at a possible future where even that isn't going to be good enough. So, in talking with a lot of players at the RSM Classic, it suddenly became real. I mean, it came crashing down on a lot of guys that, oh, this is what scarcity feels like, that my job is going to be taken from me because they want to get smaller and smaller as they move forward. That's certainly understandable. And I would argue that the Scotty Schefflers, and I can keep going down the list, the Justin Thomases and the Ludwig Obergs, and all of these uber talented players will find a way to get to the PGA Tour. There are enough pathways now for those players to filter up to the PGA Tour. It's the players, and I can go down this range right here and point to them. I'm not going to name names. I don't think that would be fair. But you can sit and point and be like, that guy probably would struggle to get out onto the tour in a scenario where there's 20 events and you have that many drastically fewer tour cards and playing opportunities because the margins just become more narrow. And suddenly the collateral damage becomes that much more.
And this is not Brian Rollup. This is not Tiger Woods. This is not members of the Future Competitions Committee of again, which covers sort of a wide swath. You have Camilo Villegas, who did not keep his PGA Tour card this season. I know he was exempt from Bermuda, but you have a Patrick Cantlay on one side, and you have a Camilo Villegas seemingly on the opposite end of the spectrum. And it's not like these players do not care about the PGA Tour's rank and file and the middle class. And Brian Rollup said as much a couple of days ago at that summit. He equated to, yes, we put the Chiefs in prime time and we make sure that, they're on Sunday Night Football and they're on Monday Night Football to garner the most eyeballs. And that is why you would sort of, in theory, expand the signature event series to get the best players in the world together more often. But the NFL is still built on the success, at least as he equated it, as the Bengals and the Lions. If those teams are successful, then the entire NFL system would be successful. If you equate that now to the PGA Tour, the strength of the PGA Tour is going to come from players 25 through, let's call it 75. Those are the players who a lot of the times they lost to Live Golf. They may not have been the superstars in their prime, the players who are going to be dominant over the next 5 years, but they were significant contributors, constant fixtures on the leaderboards. Even if they were not mopping up 3 to 4 wins a season, they're sort of constant names. That is the strength of the PGA Tour. That to me is the middle class. That to me are the Bengals and the Lions. The NFL doesn't care about the Browns and the Titans, just like the PGA Tour is shifting away from caring about players who are numbers 90 through 125. I would sort of equate it that way.
Yeah, and I read those comments from Brian Rollup, and I get where he's coming from. However, they don't have special rules to protect the middle class the way they do the stars. They have special rules in the NFL to protect those superstars. You can't lay a hand on Patrick Mahomes to that point. So I get what he's saying. I understand that if you're looking at the middle class as Cincinnati, okay, I understand that. And let's equate Cincinnati to J.J. Spawn this year. I think that's a fair comparison because I think J.J. Spawn and you and I, you and I did this conversation in the podcast 2 weeks ago when we sort of wrapped up the PGA Tour's entire season. And I think both you and I agreed that J.J. Spawn was one of the best stories of the entire year, simply not only because of what he did at the U.S. Open, what he did at the Players, what he did as a resurgent player. My point is you're leaving fewer and fewer opportunities for that middle class if we continue down this path. And it's obvious the PGA Tour is going to continue down that path. So the natural concern here is not simplicity. I think the big brains in Ponte Vedra can figure out how to make the playoffs and the points a little bit more simple than what we have right now. That one's pretty straightforward. Scarcity, as in, again, building this beautiful 20-event schedule, that also is just a matter of simply getting something on a piece of paper that you can get a majority of people to agree with. It's the parity that I think is going to be the most complicated part.
It's interesting that you said you talked to Harris English, who again made waves a couple of weeks ago by I mean, he was parroting what he had heard sort of third or fourth hand by that point about what was being discussed in those meetings. And Tiger Woods made clear there have been, dozens, if not hundreds of different models that they are spitting out and working over and going over the pros and cons. So I hesitate to sort of even key in on one. I will say, though, listening to Brian Rollup, listening to Harris English, and now listening to Tiger Woods, who is the de facto spokesperson for this Future Competitions Committee, they do seem to be honing in on the one that Harris English did verbalize a couple of weeks ago, where you would potentially start post-Super Bowl. Tiger Woods mentioned explicitly sort of staying away from the Shield and then ending before Labor Day. thus creating the strongest possible core PGA Tour product, which he said would then maximize the viewership that you have in the late spring and throughout the summer when there's not a whole lot going on and golf can dominate. And you would also, Rex, provide opportunities outside the United States. They may not be a part of this core PGA Tour schedule that's supposed to be winnowed down, that's supposed to be more efficient, that's supposed to be more optimized, that's supposed to provide a financial windfall for all of those players. But Tiger Woods also cautioned it's a long year, and we want to continue to provide opportunities for those who want to continue playing. That to me sounded like, hey, if you're the PGA Tour, co-sanctioned some of these national opens. You know, the governing bodies, Augusta National, USGA, RNA, they've all teamed up to recognize 6 different national opens that could award berths into the major championships. If you're the PGA Tour, just piggyback on some of those. If you're the PGA Tour, just piggyback on some of these strongest Rolex Series events on the DP World Tour and make them a part of a fall/winter schedule, again, for those who want it, which I think is sort of an even, you could argue that's an even more interesting part of the future PGA Tour product than just what the core product is going to look like post Super Bowl and pre-Labor Day. Because I think you and I could probably sit down and make what could be a pretty compelling schedule. It's what happens elsewhere and how that sort of works among the greater PGA Tour ecosystem that I think is equally as interesting.
Well, and the other half of this conversation is we already have a PGA Tour A and a PGA Tour B. We've talked about this in the past. There are 2 different PGA Tour schedules right now. If you just embrace that idea and quit making the distinction between A and B and elevate the Korn Ferry Tour to something else and give the players an opportunity to play their way up through there, or elevate the DP World Tour as sort of that next level, whatever the case may be. And you can create a true pyramid system like they have for football, soccer, and the UK. I've always looked at that promotion and relegation as a model that should be followed, because you're absolutely right. The Scottish Open is already part of the schedule, and I would imagine most people would count that among the 20. If I put the blank piece of paper in front of you, I think that's become an important part of the PGA Tour schedule. You're absolutely right. The Australian Open is this week. Rory's down in Australia playing it. National Opens matter. The Canadian Open matters. The Irish Open matters. So yes, there's a bunch of cool things you can do on the shoulder programming seasons. And by that, I mean before the Super Bowl and after week 0 on in college football. There's plenty of cool things you can do, but as it applies to the PGA Tour, I think the smaller product is just the reality going forward.
And look, Tiger Woods acknowledged that not every player is going to be happy with this. And in fact, many of them probably will not. Eggs are going to be broken. Eggs are going to be shattered. Spilled milk, sour grapes, whatever expression yes, whatever expression you want to use, that is what's going to happen. There is going to be conflict with the future. It's up to Tiger Woods in those meetings. And I think more importantly, it's up to Brian Rolapp, who has commanded a lot of respect, well-earned respect through his career with the NFL, to outline why, not just financially, but I think from an entertainment perspective, why this future PGA Tour schedule, which again, they're hoping to roll out in 2027, will be a benefit, not just for the players, but more importantly, for the fans. I think a lot of work remains ahead in that regard. How about Tiger Woods, Rex, the player? You have sat in a lot of these press conferences over the past decade. There was the anything after this is gravy comment. There are some where he launched a comeback after back surgery and played well to get everyone sort of whipped into a frenzy heading in to the following season. It has been a difficult year, both on and off the golf course for Tiger. Blew out his Achilles. He lost his mother. Underwent, I believe, a 7th back surgery just 6 weeks ago, a disc replacement surgery to go on to be combined with more than a dozen other medical procedures at this point, including his ankle and his back. What did he say physically, and what do you think it means for his competitive future in 2026 and beyond?
You and I have asked Tiger Woods enough questions that he hates answering questions about his schedule. Even when we knew his schedule back in his heyday, that, okay, he's going to play the Players before the Masters. From there, he's probably going to play Memorial. He's going to get ready for the U.S. Open. Even when we knew what the schedule was going to be, he would always give you a jab like, oh, I'm going to Harbour Town to try to Monday qualify for the Heritage. There was always something sort of on the edges that he didn't like about it. So I did point out he turns 50 later this month in December, and there's a lot of talk about PGA Tour champions. And I was actually a little shocked that he gave me a funny as his reply. He wasn't aggravated like he normally was. It was like, I'm going to play 25 events on both schedules, PGA Tour and PGA Champions. That should get me through the year. Ha ha ha. It's clearly not. That's not going to be the case. Now, I agree with what you said on golf today, that is probably the most pessimistic I've heard when he's talked about his competitive futures going forward. And that probably has a lot to do.
The gravy comment was certainly pessimistic. That was downright dire. That was bleak.
Yes, and I think it has a lot to do with, you pointed out, physically. This has been, for a guy that's had some bad physical years, this one's been particularly tough for him, having 2 separate surgeries on 2 separate parts of his body. He wasn't moving very well coming in or out of the media center, for whatever that means. Probably the most telling to me is didn't even play with the idea of playing PNC. That's a golf cart. That's 36 holes. That's your son hitting half the shots. You could just chip and putt. Apparently, he just started chipping and putting this week when I asked him about sort of where he is in his game. He has clearly moved to the next phase of his life. The idea that he might play the PGA Tour Champions is a conversation we're going to continue to have. I was a little surprised at RSWing Classic that I talked to some sources who seem to think that the PGA Tour Champions is preparing for him to play 6 or 7 events, possibly, which to me is, I wouldn't imagine he's going to play 6 or 7 events anywhere in the world, let alone just on one tour. So that surprised me, and I think some things could change if he does turn some sort of corner. Again, by and large, on the senior tour, we're talking about 54 holes. He can ride in a golf cart. He's hanging out with his friends. It's a much different idea. From a competitive standpoint, however, he has clearly moved on to this next phase of his life. It's being father to his son and daughter. It's being sort of the outspoken, as you pointed out, the face and the voice of what the PGA Tour is going to do next, even more so than Brian Roloff. It's being a potential Ryder Cup captain if the PGA of America ever gets around to actually asking him
Did
to
they lose
do that
his number?
job.
Like, what's happening?
Did they forget? Did someone not put it in Outlook as a reminder that on December 1st that we should probably
Contact
call
Tiger Woods about 2027. Yep, got it right here. Sorry.
I didn't accept it. That was the problem. I didn't hit accept on the invite. I don't know what I was thinking. He's just moved on, and he's embracing. You can tell, like, he's put a lot of work into FCC. That's his word for the Future Competitions Committee. He's very involved with the PGA Tour. He's going to become a captain soon. I think he's gotten to the point where, yes, if somehow his body can cooperate over the next few months, that maybe he would consider. But it was obvious right now that's not on his radar.
Yeah, he certainly seems like he just wants to play golf at this point. 2025 has been a lost year competitively, to the point where he's not even, playing recreationally with his son. And at this point, on the doorstep of turning 50 years old, that had to have been a little bit of a wake-up call. Technically, he says, the rehab is going slower than he wants. Physically, he says that he's far away. You mentioned no PNC. He said it wouldn't even be fair to the competition, would be fair to his son Charlie, who would have to shoulder the burden of playing basically by himself, but also to another team that wants to get in there. What is a great parent-child event. He does not yet know at this point about the Genesis Invitational, another tournament that he hosts. That'd be in mid-February. That certainly seems pretty ambitious at this point. Rex, I didn't even know about late-season TGL events. You and I have friends in the TGL community. That had to send a shiver down their spine as well, that he wouldn't potentially be suiting up for the Jupiter Links in early March for those events. Doesn't know yet what it means for the PGA Tour champion schedule. You and I have kicked around the idea of his affinity for an appreciation for USGA events, maybe the US Senior Open, his affinity, his respect and appreciation, his friendship with Jim Furyk. You and I were there at the Constellation Furyk and Friends just a couple of weeks ago. They had some optimism that maybe Tiger Woods would play there. He has a relationship with Inspirity. That was on his polo. You could maybe see it there. At that point, it's really up in the air. At this point, we sit here early December. He is just chipping and putting. That is a long way from ramping up competitively of, posting 180-mile ball speed, playing 4 consecutive rounds plus practice rounds leading up to a tournament, the rest and recovery afterward. To me, a more realistic target is Augusta. I'm not even sure at this point, after disc replacement surgery, if he can get there. It did not sound all that encouraging, Rexy, he could get there at this point. It's just slow. It's just slow and painful.
Look, as much as I love the romantic idea of Tiger Woods catching lightning in a bottle at Augusta National again, and we all do. We were there last time around. We know how special that could be. The idea of him showing up and walking 72 holes on that golf course when it seems like you're guaranteed one bad, cold, just brutally difficult day that's just going to take such a toll on his body, I'm not even quite sure that I can even look forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, he has continued to make the cut there. He was last among those who made the cut in 2024. It just seems to be going in a negative direction. You hope that we can see him at Augusta because it's such a special week. But at this point, TBD, Tiger Woods physically not quite there. I don't think we're revealing any state secrets, Rex, by saying that you are not necessarily covering the Hero World Challenge this week, the 20-man exhibition. It's not like you're writing game stories about who is leading this exhibition. And so that leads me to my next question, which came via email from our friend Asher, friend of the program. He actually emailed not just us, Rex, but also the folks at Barstool and our friends at No Laying Up. So he clearly wanted this viewpoint outlined. He wants to have a conversation about why the Hero World Challenge, quote, sucks today. He looked at the field. He looked at Tiger not playing. He looked at the purse. He looked at the lack of prestige and significance. What say you? You've covered this event for a long time, not just back when it was in the Bahamas, but also at Sherwood. I remember watching it as a kid. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved watching this tournament. Is it still as great today as it was in the past?
We were playing golf yesterday with our friend Todd Lewis and Andrew Bradley, the super producer who always has the great stories at the end of the year. I hope to get him back on the podcast later this year. And this came up because if I'm Tiger Woods and I'm going to do a little Feinbaum thing here, I would be a little upset about this field. I think there's 2 top 10 players in the field, with Scottie Scheffler being the obvious one. And I think there's just one other top 10 player. There was a time when you could pretty much guarantee most of the top 15 being in this field, and then a handful who were outside. Thank you for looking that up for me, since I'm having to balance my camera because of the wind out here. Yes, if I'm Tiger Woods, I'm probably, I don't know if upset is the word, but a little disappointed. And to be fair to the players who aren't here, there's plenty of things going on in the world right now. Rory McIlroy, as we pointed out, is down in Australia. He's had a busy schedule in the fall. So have a lot of the Europeans. You look at what Tommy Fleetwood has done in this fall. You had players who played last week in the Skins game who aren't here. I totally understand that there's a lot going on. We have the Golf Channel games coming up in just a few weeks. The Optimum Golf Channel. That's right? I got that right.
Oh, yes.
Please edit that if I did not. Optimum Golf Channel games coming up. So there's a lot going. This is not the off season, as people like to say, but it is surprising for an event that was such an important part of the schedule. Even though it was not part of the regular PGA Tour schedule, you could get world ranking points, all of those things. It certainly is not the field you would anticipate at Tiger's event.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty obviously is the headliner going for the 3-page. You also have J.J. Spawn. You also have Robert McIntyre. You also have Harris English. At least those players were top 10 in the world when you did have the late August cutoff. And look, there's still, I think, room for intrigue. You do have Jordan Spieth, who did not get off his couch this fall to play in a tournament despite falling outside the top 60 in the FedEx Cup points, as you and I outlined on last week's Made for TV pod. You do have Billy Horschel, who's working his way back from a hip injury. You do have a player like Chris Goddard, who's trying to, sort of regain momentum that he had throughout the summer and maybe have served this tournament as a launching pad for 2026. And I still think there's enough to chew on. But if you're looking at the greater landscape, Rex, like, my attention is probably elsewhere this week.
Sure.
You do have Rory at the Australian Open. You do have a Will Zalatoris making a competitive comeback at the South African Open. You do have a future PGA Tour player, Marco Penge, also teeing it up there as well. I do think some of the prestige, I do think some of the significance has been lost. There are players who want to shut it down, who can't even be lured off the couch for free world ranking points and a little bit of Christmas cash now that the purses on the PGA Tour have grown so exponentially large. I do wonder, though, as we sort of put a bow on this conversation, what the tournament future would be in 2027 and beyond. Because if you do have this winnowed PGA Tour core product, right, from February through the end of August, these are the top players in the world. They can't just shut it down for 5 months. They're not NFL players who are recovering and recuperating injuries and trying to get their head right and training. Like, you do have to maintain some semblance of competition. Yes, that can go abroad. Do you have more of these type of events like the Hero World Challenge, or do you have fewer of them? I think I would lean towards fewer of them while elevating some of the national opens or, again, some of those premier events in the DP World Tour. I think that's more of the future and less of these sort of 20-man exhibitions. What do you think?
And to be fair, this is a very important event for Tiger Woods' foundation.
Sure.
This goes a long way to support all of the things he does off the golf course, which have been pretty amazing. We're going to hear about that during the telecast later this week. I will say, and this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, I don't know if this is what Asher was trying to get at, that I was in the airport on Monday landing here, and I was speaking with a PGA Tour official, and he was talking about last week's Skins game and how it seemed a little flat to him. And I watched a little bit of it, and it didn't come off like I'm used, like I remember. All right, thumbs down from you. I'll go ahead and take that. And the idea was, why couldn't we have used that opportunity to bring a Bryson DeChambeau, bring a Brooks Koepka back? And this is a tour official that's telling me, and I'm a little dumbfounded because I'm like, why are you telling me this? Like, yes, it would be a really good opportunity to try to open some sort of pathway, try to open up some sort of level of communication between the two sides. I don't think any of the rank and file on the PGA Tour are going to be upset if Bryson is somehow invited into this field and he's given some sort of exemption by the PGA Tour based on what's happened over the last 3.5, 4 years. It seems like a missed opportunity, and maybe that could be a way to structure this. I get what you're saying. The National Opens and what's happening to this portion of the schedule seems to be shaping up in a much more serious fashion than what we have seen historically in golf. But I don't see this event going away as long as Tiger Woods is associated.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see it going away. I think more of what it represents, a 20-man exhibition. Are we going to see more Skins game reboots? Are we going to see more Optum Golf Channel games? Or are we going to see more, Singapore Opens? Are we going to see more DP World Tour Championships being elevated by being co-sanctioned by the PGA Tour and strengthen them that way? You still have to give the hardcore golf fan a little bit of a fix this time of year. You and I are massive, massive football fans, but we still like to tune in to golf as well. Sure. I think you and I are probably anomalies. I think you and I have to.
We're weirdos.
Yeah, we're weirdos. We're golf sickos. We want to. Maybe there are fans out there who want to take a 4 or 5 month break. I don't really know. Folks can let us know in the comment section on YouTube if that is actually the case. You want these guys to go away for 4 or 5 months. I would think if you watch the Golf Channel, if you listen to this podcast, you are among the subset of people who want to be entertained on a 52-week-a-year basis. And so I do think you still have to have these type of tournaments, but I do think the significance, the stature, the placement, the field, I think those are all probably going to fluctuate in significance and stature as we move towards the future of the PGA Tour. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Golf Chill Podcast with Rex and Lav. A special announcement: Rex and I will be doing our final made-for-TV linear podcast show at the end of this week. It would not going to be talking about anything that happens at the Hero World Challenge. We will be talking about the year in totality, newsmakers of the year, top tournaments, top shots, top moments, top memories that we had reporting from the world of golf for Golf Channel in 2025. If you have any questions, we may have some time at the end of the show to get in 2 or 3 of the very best. Hit us up in the YouTube comment section. We love hearing from you. We'd love to have it as a part of the show as we put a bow on the 2025 golf calendar. In the meantime, you know the drill, NBCSports.com. Excuse me, www.golfchannel.com. That is our home, not just for the present, but also for the future. You can find all of Rex's reporting in the Hero World Challenge. He's got plenty of good stuff as he sort of digs into the future of the PGA Tour with this star-studded field. As a reminder, Rex and I will be back on Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Golf Channel, our year-ending season finale episode. Getting those questions, look forward to tackling them. Thanks for listening. Thanks for support. Have a great rest of your week.